Amber Smith, it's great having you on the Harder Not Smarter podcast. And I know your background is with Kiowa Warriors. You were a pilot, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, I believe you said. And coming from the Marine side, Apaches and Cobras and Blackhawks, they get all the notoriety. You don't hear a whole lot about Kiowa Warriors. What was that experience like? And talk us through that platform.
So we worked with Marines all the time. I worked with Marines, especially in Afghanistan, in like different valleys, different AOs for different groups of ground guys. But the Kiowa, definitely, I totally agree with what you said in terms of, people always hear about the Blackhawk, the Apache, the Cobras. And then for the Army, at least in my deployments and the post 9/11 wars, both Iraq and Afghanistan, it kind of came out as the battlefield multiplier that people weren't expecting in Iraq and Afghanistan. We prided ourselves in being able to, if we weren't already in the air doing a different mission, like when we got a troops in contact call, like guys on the ground in a firefight, we were like 7 minutes in the air. All we need is a frequency, a call sign, and a grid to get there. And that's what we did. The mentality of the pilots was like, our sole purpose in life is to be there for the ground guys when they need us, which is when they're getting shot at. And so, a Kiowa, it's a light attack reconnaissance helicopter. We fly extremely low level. We carry a 50 cal machine gun, rocket pod. And then the mission itself is convoy security, hunting for IEDs, like I said, responding to troops in contacts, searching for the enemy in the mountains of Afghanistan, deserts of Iraq, and just really like anything the ground guys need from us. So like we would get a call from them and they would be like, I need you to check out this grid. Like we're constantly getting hit from like over here. Go check it out, see what you can find. Or we're firing artillery, observe fire, escort a medevac, like all of it. We did a lot.
I can see how that lines up really well with the Marines. I'm surprised we don't have something like that because, the Army, you guys considered the tanks or the Apaches as basically flying tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Look at them as aircraft. And the Marines, everything is about supporting that 19-year-old Lance Corporal rifleman on the ground. Everything from the F-18s, the tanks, the Cobras, everything's about that one rifleman on the ground. So I can see how that resonates really well with what they were doing out there.
Iraq was like, I feel like a little bit more like a lot of like IED style ambushes, and this is my experience based on the location that I was at. Obviously, It was like very different. We were in Kirkuk and we were also in like the Bakiba, AO, Balad, that area. And it was much more like I said, like IED ambushes, a lot of convoy securities, every now and then a complex like firefight. But we got to Afghanistan and it was just like firefight. Like that's all we did in Afghanistan was like ground guys getting shot at, like in some kind of battle, and like us coming in. That was like it was interesting, how different the wars were.
So you would just get troops in contact calls and you would haul
we were
ass
like
over
we were like a fire engine getting like a call. Yeah. And it was like racing to different parts of the AO, and it was pretty busy. It was busy.
What years were you over there?
Afghanistan, I was there all of 2008. Got there like New Year's, left New Year's, right around New Year's. And then Iraq, I was there August 2005 to August 2006.
How was the rules of engagement over there? Like, or I guess like identifying targets versus like in Iraq versus Afghanistan. Was that a very different landscape? Because you always hear about like guys ditching weapons and running, obviously, and trying to just blend in with the civilian population. I mean, we see it to a certain degree on the ground, but it's obviously much more pronounced when you can have eyes in the sky and just not something that you don't get to appreciate from the ground.
Yeah, I want to say, I guess, for Iraq specifically, it was a little bit more urban. And so, yeah, it was like a little bit more difficult, where like often in Afghanistan, it was more mountainous. Like it was a lot more like in the middle of nowhere with, every now and then some huts. Um, but in terms of like the rules of engagement, yeah, like if we maintained PID, um, and I guess like as the aerial observer, if we were able to maintain that connection with whoever we saw doing what, yeah, we would just follow them and fly over them and be like, here they are,
Yeah.
and the ground guys would come in, or like if we got a request for fire. So yeah.
And like the Apaches, they have the super high speed helmets where they look to the right, the gun aims to the right, they look left. You guys they're just mounted straight ahead wherever the helicopter is pointed. You're just straight analog, right?
Yes, it is point and shoot. And so, like, a lot of the helicopter pilots, so shooting from a helicopter is such a perishable skill. It all has to do with your training and how often you're doing it. If you told a pilot and I've heard, like, oh my gosh, some serious horror stories from the ground guy's perspective as well. But if you take a pilot, you know, a week, 2 weeks into the deployment, your shooting skills are probably not as good. Like, a few months in through the rest of the deployment, like you're on it. Like you're a pretty good shot by then. But it's a perishable skill. So the more you do it, the better you are. The worse or the less time you get, the worse you are. Um, a lot of times you take like a dry erase marker and you learn how you sit in the seat. And you know where to look. So on the windscreen, you place like an X or a plus, and that is basically like your sight. And so you look at it, you have your
That's
little X
awesome.
or your thing
I,
on your
I
sight.
was expecting some kind of like, at least on, like our rifles, we have those holographic things where if you look a little bit, it's always pointed at the right spot.
No,
It
we're not
helps.
that fancy. No, we were like old school, like 80s technology,
So a dry erase pen on on the windshield.
making it happen with what we have.
Do
That's
you
awesome.
have is it like distance metrics of all right, here's 200 yards, here's 300 yards, or is it just like we always engage from about 300 yards out, and so this is just what we'll just
Yeah,
uh,
it's
gauge it
like
from that.
yeah, it's by like feeling insight. So
That's that's
I
cool
can
because
definitely see how that would be a perishable skill.
a 50 cal, it's called walking it on. I'm sure you guys have
hmm
on
Yep.
the ground, like you can like walk it on. Um, and that's why a lot of people do prefer they fire the 50 cal first and they get it perfect. They fire it and then they switch to rockets really quickly and then they fire away like two or three rockets like right after the 50 cal. So you're like more likely to get right there on your target.
Yeah, it
Oh,
takes
that's
on a whole
so
new
awesome.
meaning of perishable skill when you can just wipe away the windshield. Like, oh, my sight's gone. Let me redraw that on there.
Yeah, can I come back? And yeah. So.
Well, good thing you're working with the Marines. You can just ask them for a crayon, right?
Yep, you
If
guys
we didn't
always
already
have
eat
one
them.
on you.
So
We
going
loved
from
the Marines. We loved working with the Marines. They were awesome.
we're a hardy bunch, you know. Just feed us and
Yeah.
point us in the right direction. We'll be happy. So that we always joke that team guys get all the book deals. So how did you decide to go from the Kiowa Warrior? Your book was awesome. I read the first one, Danger Close. It's got some incredible stories. It has that McCraven feel of sea stories where you blend together a lot of stories across your career so you can get a feel for who you are, but also your experiences that you saw as a helicopter pilot in Iraq, in Afghanistan, as a female pilot, and then just uh, the environment as a whole of being a service member across a variety of periods in our war in the Middle East. At what point did you have the idea to write the book?
So I was not sort of into, I was really terrified to take my story and like put it out there to the world, because that's kind of what you do when you write a book about your own experiences. And it was, I mean, at least for the military, for me, I always say in order to survive, I was like a much younger female than most of my colleagues. I talk about that in the book where, you know,
Mm-hmm.
most people were men about a decade older than me. And so I was in the military for almost 8 years. And I think part of it was, um, I had, you know, put my guard up, was not vulnerable whatsoever in order to like, I guess, work successfully in that environment. And so the thought of um, letting my guard down and being vulnerable to everyone was not something that I was kind of okay with at first. And I had a friend who wrote a book, a very successful military memoir book. And he was like, Amber, he's like, you have to write a book. He's like, there's no other female helicopter or female Kiowa pilots who've written a book. Like, there's not, that perspective isn't out there. And you guys did, you know, what you did during the wars, and people need to hear about it. And so I kind of thought about that, and I was like, okay, you know, that's like good, like mentorship. Like, maybe I should write a book. And so pursued it, ended up, you know, getting my book deal. And, you know, once you have a book deal, it's like suddenly like the pressure's on. You now have to like write your book and tell your
So you went
story.
that route. You got a publisher. You had a
Yeah, so
manager
my
type thing.
book was, when I published my book, so I got my book deal, I think 2014, and then it was actually published in 16, which is like, we can fast forward in a little bit about how the publishing industry has changed. But yeah, back then, almost a decade ago, that was like the route that you took. And I went
Mm-hmm.
with a traditional publisher for this book as well, but there's so many more options out there now. But writing the book itself, like I always say, you know, because I do get talked up, like a lot of people ask me, like, how do you write a book? Something that I want to do. And I do always, like, especially for military veterans, I always, always, always encourage it, because even for me, where I don't know, it was like writing my book, I say, gave me closure I never knew I was looking for from that chapter of my life. And so that is what I want for everyone, to sort of revisit things that they experienced and went through. And you kind of learn from them when you revisit them from a different time of life, a different perspective. Um, and so, yeah, I think writing is very therapeutic, and um, everybody should write, even if it's not like a traditional book. I just think it's helpful.
I
I'm
think
right
that's
there
what
with you.
Kevin and I like originally connected over was just how we felt like, because we both started writing on LinkedIn around the same time, and then um, ended up talking, and we're like, man, like writing is just so cathartic. It was such a good outlet for us during our transition, just to get that out in written form. Like, you know, I always say that LinkedIn's sort of like my public journal a little bit, but it feels good to get your story out there and just write, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
And with your first book, you brought up a scenario where you had a mishap in flying. How was that as you were putting that pen to paper? You're talking about the situation. Obviously, there was some negative response from your command, some stuff you had to deal with. There was some interpersonal relationship issues with how people were interacting with one another. How was that as you were first deciding to write about that situation, and then after it was published, did you have any fallout coming from it, or was it actually pretty well received?
Are you talking about the accident?
Yeah, where there's the collision.
Yeah, I actually think what's so funny and not funny, so maybe like ironic about some of the leadership issues that I talk about now in my next book. Like looking back at the way that that was handled through leadership. And to tell you the truth, a lot of the people I interviewed for my book Unfit to Fight that's coming out, and some of the leadership issues that they face today, including many pilots in aviation branch and some very similar experiences to what I experienced with my accident, and how they handled it, and how everyone was in CYA mode.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't really like, right and wrong almost wasn't what it was more of perceptions. How is this going to be perceived when this goes up the channel, and like zero disregard for like facts of what actually happened on the ground. So I mean, and that was, when was that? 2007. So we're coming up on like 15 years, and it's like, I think those types of leadership mismanagement or even failures have just gotten like magnified. They've gotten so much worse in the military.
Yeah, I mean it's
So
a great segue.
writing about it was actually fine, because I was like, I'm finally getting to tell my story, and it's like I had all the sworn statements, like everything, and I just got to then uh, write about it. And I don't know if I to put it in the book, but like some of the people that I spoke to that were involved in the accident like came up to me afterwards and were like, I'm really sorry about what happened to you. Like, oh, Amber got her life ruined there for a little bit because of what I did, like because of what happened. And so there was like absolutely acknowledgement of, in terms of like what happened. But yeah, I had like senior warrants and senior people being like, the only thing that happened here was like ruining a pilot's like perception, and like the pilot's perception of the institution that you serve and have given so much to. And something I would compare that to is how like modern day is how a lot of service members felt with the COVID mandate, and how they had this awakening to an institution that they trusted and loved and had sacrificed for and given much of their lives, and their families had sacrificed for. And then when they stood on principle or asked for religious accommodations or whatever that may be, they saw the true colors of sort of leadership and what people, what the institution was actually about.
Did you get any kickback from people that maybe you didn't keep in contact with, and all of a sudden this book comes out and they're reading about what happened?
So I interviewed almost everyone that is mentioned in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like I did an interview with them before writing it, and so most people knew it was coming. And I don't know. Sometimes veterans themselves, so you always hear about like the brotherhood and sisterhood and all of that, which is true, but like there's no harsher critic than a fellow veteran of someone who like comes out and like puts themselves out there. So yeah, I'm sure I got plenty of criticism. Not much that I remember, but and then now I've just kind of been doing this for a while, so I'm like, cool, your opinion, like not any of my concern. So
What about this next book? Is there going to be some ruffling? The topic seems like you could ruffle some feathers. Maybe ruffle some feathers.
yeah, I mean, if you look at some
Yes.
of the stuff even that I post on LinkedIn, it's like bothers a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, but you want to know what? The whole reason for me writing the book is that I feel like the military that I loved and I'm proud of serving, learned so much from, helped shaped who I am today. Like I feel like that military is gone in a sense in terms of the path that they've veered off of with recent leadership at the top, both civilian appointees and in uniform in the flag officer ranks. And then also like the withdrawal of Afghanistan, the COVID mandates. And then I think what actually lit the fire in terms of me being like, no, like I'm actually going to write about this is I think it was summer 2022. It was the chief of staff of the Army going and testifying on Capitol Hill about the recruitment numbers that the Army was missing by like 25% or something like that, drastic, like a significant number. And the excuse he gave after being questioned was just excuse after excuse after excuse, with what I felt like was not addressing a deeper rooted, like, systemic problem within the military. So I was like, I want to write about some of what people who are serving in the military are facing today.
So this new
What do
book,
you think?
Unfit to Fight.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so this new book, Unfit to Fight, you saw the testimony going on Capitol Hill. What have you been doing to research? And I know your husband's at the Pentagon right now, so you're in the DC area, so you have access to all the head shit that you can possibly, not really through your husband, but just because you're near the Pentagon. Have you been able to get some good interviews with people that are willing to speak out, some people that are willing to give comments but not be affiliated with it? What's been the research experience?
Yeah, my husband had zero part in this book whatsoever.
Sorry to drag him into that.
Damn
uh,
it, Kevin.
I know.
so for the research side of this, it was, I mean, I'm still well connected in the military and veteran community just because of the work that I do. And so people that I know, just recommending people, reaching out to people, seeing if they'd be interested in talking to me, telling their story. I did dozens and dozens of interviews, both with active duty, people who had been kicked out, people who had recently retired, some who had retired or ETS'd because their time was up. They would have stayed in, but because of the COVID mandates, ended up decided to leave. And then some Guard reserve people as well, from all branches. So I got like a good feel for what a lot of people were experiencing. But the interview process was interesting because, like I said, like I'm still speaking with people, I feel like, nonstop about the military and what it's like to serve. But when I got to do like an actual like in-depth interview with these people and ask questions, it was just like a lot of them were pretty heartbreaking at the stories that they have, with what they went through. So yeah, I got some good interviews.
Do you have any notable people that people could be excited about when the book comes out?
Oh no, like not like my interviews are with people like just day to day, like
They're the
people
recipients
serving.
of the
Yeah, I'm
policy
not.
that came
No,
down.
I didn't. I mean, let's
You didn't
just
get
say
Lloyd Austin or something like
General
that in there.
Milley probably wouldn't be interested in me interviewing him. Much as that would be fantastic.
Who was it that was being grilled? Was it Lloyd Austin that was getting grilled by the Senate after he came back, and the congressman was basically like, "Are
Captain
you willing now?"
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, "Are you now willing to grant back with back pay the people that were kicked out?" I think it was something they were talking about how the efficacy of this stuff or the policy wasn't applicable, and so they're basically asking the senior defense people, "Are you willing now to reinstate these members that were kicked out with back pay?" And they're saying, "No, we
Yeah.
will not."
It was because they don't care. They didn't care about those people. And I think that was a big awakening to a lot of service members, is like, hey, I am sacrificing every day. They always tell us that like leadership starts at the top, and lead by example, take care of everybody else before you take care of yourself. Like Secretary Austin took care of himself, and that's who he took care of with the memo that he signed and sent and ordered his troops to take the COVID vaccine in August of 2021. He made sure it was legal, what he said in that memo. It was, he said they were going to adhere to the law surrounding religious accommodations, and that they would use an, approved vaccine. Um, and instead, they did not have those vaccines on hand that had the FDA approval. And so he ordered everybody to take the vaccine without the actual product available. But they had the EUA vaccine, which was not required, which was like you can't order someone to take the EUA vaccine,
Mm-hmm.
and they can do it voluntarily, but it's not something that he could order. The president of the United States could. He has the authority to then mandate that, and then Secretary Austin could mandate the force to do that. But POTUS didn't want to do that for obvious political reasons. So instead, he had Austin do it. Austin doesn't have the authority to order the EUA shot to be mandatory. So he ordered a, fully approved vaccine, which no one had on hand. But guess what? Every base in America had the EUA shot. So the commanders, started going down the command, and everybody said, take this vaccine, take this vaccine. Most people blindly went along with it. Some people were like, well, you can't order me to take this. This isn't even what Austin ordered me to take. And so those people started getting in trouble, and obviously getting blacklisted, getting removed from commands. And then even on the religious accommodation side, they were giving blanket letters, which is not how the law states a religious exemption will be handled. It will be handled on an individual basis, and they weren't. They were just blanket denials. And so it was extremely damaging to the force. A lot of people who don't understand the specifics of what happened, um, you know, they just try to be like, "What's the big deal? It's a vaccine." But you don't get, even the Department of Defense doesn't get to pick and choose when the law applies to it.
Mm-hmm. So with this book, what obviously there's the aspect about vaccines, but what other areas did you touch on about? Kind of the overall theme is just wokeness infiltrating into the military and influencing policy, influencing command decisions. Getting back to what we were talking about earlier, turning into a lot of CYA stuff. I've been talking with a bunch of my former SEAL colleagues, and they have a class that's going through BUDS right now in second phase, and they wanted to make a plaque, and it's a tribute to the man. Paying the man for missteps and stuff like that. And so it's this whole, not poem, it's more of like a short paragraph thing about how the man doesn't care if you're tired, the man doesn't care about all this stuff, but you pay the man so that you pay him in peace, and you don't have to pay with your life in combat. And they're questioning whether this is a legitimate thing because it has the man in there and it's not woman. And so they're literally trying. There's a whole chat group going around like, can we find the citation of who wrote this? Because they're demanding that they have the citation so they can show that this was an older thing, and it's not just them trying to make it a male-dominated SEAL community thing.
Is
And
there,
there's just little things like that
no
floating
female,
around.
right? Am I wrong or am I right on
Correct.
that? There's no female SEALs.
None.
So why does everyone have to go out of their way to like change everything?
You
It's
guys, the SEALs, you guys went under, Buds went under like a training command, right?
Yeah, so originally SEALs were a secondary school. That's why you used to see it be like, petty officer, first class, uh, torpedo men, and then parentheses SEAL, is because they would go to that.
Torpedo man, that's awesome.
There was all
Is
kinds
that
of
an
weird stuff.
MOS?
Yeah, there's torpedo men, there's radar men, there's all kinds of weird things. But
Badass.
yeah, so it used to be a secondary school, and you just kind of volunteered to go do that, for a variety of reasons, largely for promotion. Because if guys had a super technical field, let's say they were a radar technician, there's secret level equipment on how to repair this stuff. and the last time they touched that piece of equipment was when they were in school, and now they're doing SEAL operation stuff. To get promoted in the Navy, you had to take tests in your rate. Well, if you haven't been working on this stuff, they were having to study up to pass the test. And if there was a secret level clearance for the stuff, they have to go into a skiff to read up on it. And so they're like, we just need to professionalize this whole force to make it standard. We don't need to have all this back and forth with all these different rates. And so when they made the SEAL community a rate, they then moved Buns under training education command, and that changed all kinds of stuff within the community.
Yeah.
Now we're having scrutiny from big Navy, from full the DoD level stuff on everything needed to be documented, training. So there's good and bad to what happened, but yeah, you can see a lot change. I think it was right around 2008 that they made that shift to where you actually had the SO rate. But that's the SEAL community over the last 20 years has changed dramatically in the oversight and the scrutiny. And it's not all the military. A lot of it is also just the access the media has and the power the average citizen can have. If they have a complaint, if something happened, if there's a death, now the family jumps in, you get instant nationwide coverage. And we give a lot of credence to people that aren't involved in a community that have scrutinized opinions of it. The most recent one that student that died, and his mom was going off on a tirade about how the doctors were giving treatment worse than what prisoners get and all this stuff. Like, I went through Buds that they gave all kinds of levels of oversight to us. I don't remember if there was ever a statement whether or not he was on PEDs, but I know that they found PEDs in his car or in his locker or something like that, which can play into it. But we just give so much credence to the outside world just because they have a grievance, and it lends right into what you're talking about, Amber. With everything is about CYA reactions of, all right, how's the public going to respond to this? Instead of making the right decision, we're now making a decision to try and prevent bad fallout down the road.
Yeah.
Or how is my career going to be affected by this? Careerism is like rampant in SOF. It's gross. I'm sure it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, so the overall message, like the reoccurring message or theme throughout my entire book is this making the military a more elite and lethal fighting force that can kill and destroy our enemies in order for us to win wars? And so it covers leadership, just like you guys said, where it has gone astray, and it is CYA, it is ladder climbing, it is turned into where people fail up, when they toe the line. And some of the very specific examples of that, I talk about the withdrawal, which turned into the evacuation of Afghanistan. I talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how
I like to
they
call
have
that DIE instead. I don't know why
DIE,
that hasn't caught
exactly.
on.
People are going to die because of it. Yes. And how that's affecting the force, and policies that the Army at the Pentagon, leaders at the Pentagon, are focusing on appeasing a very, very small demographic, but also changing culture and negatively, and really detracting from the mission, focusing on the uniqueness of an individual instead of what's always made the military great, which is being a meritocracy where people are judged on merit, and that's how they determine the best person for the job. Now with DEI, they're essentially judging people on other qualities that people were born with that no one can absolutely control, and justifying it, skirting words like quotas, which are illegal in military recruiting, and changing them to targets or goals in order to still have the same effect. We talk about CRT, critical race theory, being taught at the service academies, and how it's really infecting these future leaders of our military. And instead of focusing on what it takes to be a battlefield leader in combat, what your soldiers are going to need you to be when the bullets are flying, it's, well, what is white rage, and classes that are taught about whiteness and unconscious bias. Once again, going back to my theme, which is, how does that make the military stronger? How does that make everybody more capable of fighting and winning wars? I also talk about the recruiting, how all of this plays into the recruiting woes. I talk about all of the pride stuff, transgender policy, um, women in special operations, actually. And then also what's the consequences and are of these policies, and sort of the culture shift and failures of leadership in the military today. What
What
that
are your thoughts on females in special operations?
So my thoughts have kind of evolved. They've evolved a couple times. Initially, I was like, women should be given the opportunity to try. Like, if they're good enough, then why can't they do it? Like, they shouldn't be um, excluded if they're the best person for the job solely for being a female. Um, the way I viewed it now, I look back at that being fairly naive to reality of the Department of Defense, meaning, of course, that's what most people would say, right? Like, okay, you can't, why would a woman, if she's the best, most capable person for the job, why would she not be able to do it? It's, if you go back to 2015 in December, when Secretary Ash Carter lifted the ban on females serving in combat and special operation positions, he wrote a list that was published on the Department of Defense website, and it was 7 steps of how women were going to be integrated into special operations and ground units. And on paper, it made so much sense. It was like, absolutely, this is great. It was like, it didn't take, like, I don't know, 6 months for commanders to be like, I want to be the first. I want to put this OER bullet that I have the first female ranger graduate ranger school. I have, the first person trying out, like, I want all these females in. And it was like everything that Secretary Carter had written was not followed. It says, like, this is going to be based on merit, the best persons for the job. Women aren't going to receive special treatment. And I think that it was good intentions. And I think the results have not been what is best for the military as a fighting force in terms of forcing some women into some of these positions. I think that women, should serve in the military. They have a place in the military. I think a lot of military leadership doesn't like the reality that not a lot of women want to serve in these positions. And so that's kind of where I am now. I've talked to so many people with so many stories that unfortunately are quite negative.
I will say, so I 100% agree, because I think a lot of it ends up being like a dog and pony show. Like, especially a lot of these schools, when females show up, I think it ends up being like you have all these this brass that all of a sudden shows up, and it's just like way atypical from how things are usually ran. However, I have a friend that served with the first female 18 Alpha Special Forces team leader over at 10th Group in Germany, and he is like the person that was like, no, I will never, like, once women are let into the ranks, like, I'm done with the military. And I mean, like, ironically, the team leader ends up being his team leader for his team over there. And his remarks is that she is the best team leader that he's ever had, um, that he's ever served with, which is
That's
crazy.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's how it should.
Um,
But it's like, does she then? And that's probably because, I mean, I hope that, you know, she meets every standard. They're not being lowered for her, and she's not getting any special treatment. But this is where like Army tries to come in and be like, well, does she need a battle buddy? Does she need, you know, like, and then are they going to bring somebody else in who isn't as qualified as she is and isn't able to, you know, maintain whatever? And so it's just, it's gotten, um like I said, it was good intentioned, but the implementation hasn't been the best. And honestly, like, for I feel like it's bad for women. If I was still serving, I would be like, get out of here. Like you guys like pushing all of this stuff onto me, it's causing the guys that I'm working with to probably not like me, in all honesty. Like if they're constantly having to hear about how there's double standards for me, and I don't have to do like the same physical tests, and I'm getting accepted into schools because my physical test scoring was higher because I have to do much less, even though we have the exact same mission, you know, that creates resentment, and that
Mhm.
breaks down a team. And so that's why I say, like, if you want the best for women, have them do a mission standard. The mission standard doesn't change because you're a woman. The mission stays the exact same. Just somebody else, if you're only meeting like a whatever the female standard is instead of the male standard, which is usually typically the mission standard, somebody's having to pick up your weight for it. Not in every scenario, just like you said. There are some badass, incredible, amazing women who want to serve the country. Good, go do it. You guys are the ones that should do it. I don't want to see standards lowered to ensure that we have a higher number of women serving in some of these positions. If they want to do it, if they want to try out equal opportunity, absolutely. If you're good enough, regardless of what your sex happens to be, then you should be there. But if it's for any reason other than that, which we have seen is the case in many situations in the military today, um, the Secretary of the Army said that she wanted to change the entire Army physical fitness test because she thought it was too tough for women, and she thought it was going to hurt recruitment and retention. So what did they do? They lowered the standard. Okay, so this is like an example of where I take issue, where senior leaders are making these decisions and they're hurting like operational level women who are in there, and now having to like be like, oh, were you one of the females that made it in because you're a badass and can do everything and belong here, or are you one that came in because the Pentagon wants more women around us? So it's
Mhm.
like, see how that's not good for women.
what does that do to the recruitment side on like the male side as well? Like if you're just hearing about all these standards being lowered for women, it's like, well, is that really a military that I want to be a part of?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. That's
yeah.
exactly what they're seeing today. People used to join the military because they wanted to destroy and break things and run cool equipment and shoot guns. And that's like, now they come in and they're like, let me bog you down with like 4 months of like unconscious bias training, extremism training, um, like like transgender training, like pronoun training, like all of this stuff where it's like, I thought I was coming in to like protect the nation and fight a war if I had to and be an expert at whatever my MOS is. Like that's what I thought I was here to do. And it's like, nope, not in the new military, not in today's military. You get all this extra stuff that says you're the problem.
Yeah. So with all these things that you're very accurately pointing out, is there a solution or conclusion that you recommend in the book that's like, these are the things we need to do to course correct back to a stronger, more effective military?
Yeah, so there's two things that have to happen kind of immediately. Um, it's returning the institution to a meritocracy, and in order to do that, that's going to take such a coordinated effort that whoever is tasked with doing that, it's going to be the hardest job of their existence. Because it's going to have to be a coordinated effort from the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, Congress, COCOM commanders, service secretaries, and basically like every commander on down, in terms of, ripping up executive orders that is forcing a lot of these policies onto the services to have these policies and these jobs. And the other one is accountability, which seems it's accountability for senior leaders is fairly non-existent these days. It's a rarity to have a senior leader fired for performance. I know every now and then a Navy ship commander will get fired, but that still is pretty rare. If a flag officer is fired, or even just as a lieutenant colonel, honestly, and above, it is usually for conduct, for some sort of personal conduct, instead of actually being able to do their job. And what we saw in World War II is you had battlefield commanders that were tasked with, winning this battle, and they were given a couple months to do it. And if they couldn't perform in combat, they got fired. They got replaced with somebody that they could. It's business, and war is the business of the military. Fast forward to Vietnam, you started to see things change because the Department of Defense saw a general being fired as a PR failure on that part. They thought the way the public perceived a general being fired wasn't individual to the general's actions, it was to the department as a whole. So it was a failure of the entire military. So they started to circle the wagons. When people couldn't perform, they did not fire them, maybe moved positions, but they just kept moving forward. And same leaders kept climbing the ladder and making the same mistakes. And it's only gotten worse in the decades since. Like I just said, look at Afghanistan. You saw ISAF commanders of Afghanistan, year after year after year testify in front of Congress that the war was winnable, that the ANA was able to stand on their own feet and fight the Taliban and sustain the security of their nation, year after year after year, to the point 2 weeks before the fall of Afghanistan, General Milley was singing their praises and essentially laughing at the fact that anyone could think that the Taliban could take over the country with the however many 100,000 force the Afghan military was.
Supposedly had.
What did you say?
Supposedly had. A lot of those numbers were apparently inflated and double tapped because they were getting money for every soldier that was showing up.
Exactly. So those, and to this day, not a single person has been held accountable for not only the withdrawal, but the entire war, and essentially what they sold to us, which was not real. They didn't sell us the reality of what it was like on the ground. But those who had been there and served there knew. So accountability, meritocracy, those are two things that have to return in order to then be able to work on the culture. Culture is going to take much longer because it's generational. And like I said, the military academies have been infected by this mindset and culture. And so that's going to take a whole lot longer.
I mean, that's a profound undertaking. I feel like the only way that's really going to get this solved is to have a post-World War I similar purge. They're just like, all right, all these senior officers, you're just going to have to go. We're going to bring up new people to kind of cleanse out the ranks and bring in some new thinking. Because right now that it's, especially at the general flag officer level, it's very much a good old boys network, good old boy and good old girl network.
Bunch of yes men.
And like they all are involved with promoting themselves, and it's all about which general or admiral has been in your corner that's pulling you up. They literally go through of like who's recommending this person, what's their background, and so that I think you just need to restart that whole thing. But I don't know how you would effectively be able to do that without jeopardizing the effect of this, because there is resident knowledge that is important to have there. And if you just bring in a bunch of new people, I'm sure they'll be able to figure it out, but there'll be a lot of growing pains in making that happen.
But it is extremely bloated right now. So there is
Oh, for sure.
plenty of room to make significantly drastic cuts. And the thing is that generals have become celebrities within the military. And, each general has, you know, four aides following them around. And it's like, no, let's like change once again the culture that you guys are real people with a job to do here. Um, and they become essentially spokespeople. They become representatives of the military. And we don't need the numbers to be where they are if that's what you're going to do. We have spokespeople as well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see the book when it comes out, April 30th, Unfit to Fight. Are there any speaking engagements or other areas where people can hear you talk about your thoughts, this book, and the recommendations moving forward on how to solve the bloat and the issue we're having in the military?
Yeah, so my book's available for pre-order now on Fit to Fight. You can head over to Amazon and pick it up. It'll be delivered.
We'll have it in the links.
Yeah, it'll be in the show links.
Okay, great. And then if you're looking for more information on me talking about this subject, my website, officialambersmith.com, you can find a bunch of my media and different speaking engagements there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I know this is a very detailed topic that we could probably spend hours really diving into and analyzing and giving our armchair quarterback opinion of how to fix all the problems in the military that we're no longer in. But it is an important topic that needs to be discussed. And thank you so much for taking on that challenge of really bringing it to the forefront and not letting it just fall behind and continuing on with the same old.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on your show.
Our pleasure.
Thanks, Amber.
Thank you.